Hello, React Native developers. I hope you are well. William here, recording from beautiful Zurich, Switzerland. This is part 3 and the final part of our pizza animation challenge. So we've implemented this nice pizza slider and the shared transition, as well as the ability to add ingredients to the pizza. And I can even drag and drop some ingredients on the pizza. Now, in this video, we're going to implement the 3D animation of the box going into the pizza and the box into the checkout icon. Here, someone suggested in the comment that I use free.js, and I was so excited to have a good excuse to finally get into this library, which we're going to use for this example. It's a bit here impractical to use free.js. If this was a real-world app, probably I would use After Effects and Lottie. But I just was looking for an excuse to use free.js. So I'm pretty excited. And I absolutely don't want to install the Adobe Cloud Creative thingy on my laptop. So that's perfect. And this is going to be a little bit of a reverse tutorial because I am struggling with free.js. I'm pretty new with it. So I'm going to hack 2 or 3 things. And hopefully in the comments, you will show me if you are a free.js user. You will teach me how to do these things properly. So I am pretty excited. This is a 2-part animation. First, we're going to do the 3D animation and then all the animations on the React Native side. Let's have a look. The first thing I did is that I bought a 3D model of a pizza box online, and that cost me $20. And then I used the trial version of Cinema 4D to export it to a format that 3GS can work with. So in 3.js, they support many model formats that we can load. They recommend to use gl.tf, and in fact, in React Native, it appears to be the only 3D model format we can load, gl.tf. And here I used babylon.js to validate the model file. So first, I had an export, which I could load in this sandbox, but then I couldn't load it in React Native, and I had some validation errors. And then I tweaked the export to remove the validation errors. And as soon as my model was valid, I could finally load it into React Native. And then in my project, very important, I had to create a metro.config file, add the gltf extension so I can use it into a require. And here, again, huge kudos to Expo. They've done an incredible work for the community, so we can use free.js, React, free fiber, which is the binding of free.js in React within Expo and within React Native. Absolutely incredible. So for us to be able to use these primitives into React Native, there is a lot of groundwork which has been done mainly by Expo, and I guess mainly also by Evan Bacon. So thankful that we get to do these cool things. So here we have our pizza element and I have the pizza box, which is going to be our 3D animation, and currently it's empty. And so the first thing I'm going to do here is to put it above the pizza just for debugging, and then we're going to put it behind the pizza. So let's load our models. We have 2 models, the top of the pizza box and the bottom of the pizza box. And so we're going to have top, and I'm going to use model, which is a function of my own co-function, but very simple. So here there's a hack, so we can load the gltf model. In the use model hook, we download the asset using expo asset, and then the gltf loader from free.js, we load, and then we set it into a state, so we trigger a re-render once the model is loaded. So pretty straightforward. So let me save this one. So use model, and here we can put the require. So I think it's assets, and then it's like pizza box top, and then 3 because I had to try a different version of the export. So this is version 3. And we can do the same for the bottom. if the models are not loaded yet, so if top is null or bottom is null, we return nothing. If not, we can return the canvas. So from React Free Fiber, which is the bindings of Free.js for React. So Canva, we can add the style container, which is simply the absolute fill object. And then we're going to create one component for each model. So here I'm going to call it box. So I'm going to do object top. One is going to be animated. The other is going to, the bottom is going to stay static. So top, bottom. And so Canva, we get from free.js, the box component we're going to create right now. So we get object as a property. So let me do box props quickly. So object is of type group from free.js, perfect. And here we can simply return the primitive component from free fiber and pass object as property. So that looks good. You might think it doesn't look good, but first of all, it's black because we need to add some lights. So here I can add ambient light. So that looks good. Now we need to get away a bit from it. So you see here I have the size, which I got from Cinema 4D, the dimension. So we're gonna get away on the Z axis a bit. I'm not sure actually the Z index on the Canva which direction it's pointing to, but let me try. So camera position. So we would have 0, 0, and maybe let's try minus 300, right? Because here we have 257. So that looks good. On the Babylon GS sandbox, they had like multiple directional lights, which we could see in the background when we were moving the object. Here I'm going to do maybe one. So directional light and just put the position of the camera. So that would be position. So you see here we have a nice 3D effect because of the light. So I guess here to have only one is good enough. And the default position is going to be, so this is, let's say, the end position of our animation. So we want to rotate it on the x-axis. And so here I'm going to do, and maybe by 30 degrees, 45 degrees, we can change it. So I'm going to do rotation minus, or again here I'm not sure if it's minus or plus. Let's try. So divided by 6, that would be 30 degrees. No, so it's a minus. Perfect. So let's say this is going to be the end position of our animation. Now let's animate, and this is where things are going to get a bit hacky. So we're going to rotate on a pivot, right? We don't rotate the top from the center of the object, but from the edge. And in React, we know how to do this, and we know how to do these things in also using matrix transformations. We've done it a couple of times. I found a way to do it, so using matrix multiplication. So this is copy-pasted from Stack Overflow. This can be simplified, but the main idea is sound. Where things get hacky is that I couldn't find, so every frame we're going to update the rotation, is that I couldn't find a way to apply a matrix from scratch. So every time I do apply transformation matrix is based on all previous transformations. So instead of having some timing functions calculate the current transformation and applying it, I need to apply the delta. So look at every frame and apply the delta transformation at every frame. And the second thing, which is going to be a bit hacky, is that here we set a default rotation. So here I could set a default Z rotation, but I want to set a default Z rotation on a pivot. And I don't know how to do it in React Native. So I'm going to create a init variable so I can set the default rotation imperatively. So that's a bit hacky. So and then because we have to do the communication between React Native animations and free.js, it's not gonna help out. But so the bottom will never be moving and the box is gonna move. So we're gonna create an animation property and we're gonna go from, let's say 35 degrees. So pi divided by 4, is it, or minus? Pi divided by 4 to 0, let's say. So here we have a optional animation property. So with from to so we're gonna apply some matrices to this object. So we need its reference to be able to do so. So I'm gonna do use ref equals use ref. Another sign that we're entering the hack zone is that here, because so this is of type interesting elements primitives and I didn't know how to access it. So I'm going to use any, and I never use any in my videos. So you know that these things we are doing things on the edge here. So up, let me disable the warning, import use ref. And now so I'm going to create another ref. Is it init or not? So use ref init false. And now we're going to use frame from free fiber. So every frame we can execute some code. Now if there is no animation to be done. So if animation is false or null undefined, we return. If not, we get from and to from animation. And if init is false, we can set the default rotation. So we get the pivot matrix. And it's going to be so size.z divided by 2, right? So from the center to the edge, or plus. I think it's plus. And then the angle is from. And so then we apply it. So using ref.current apply matrix. And then we need to set it to true again. So that looks good. So now let's animate. So we're gonna count frames. I know it's terrible, but that's the only way I know how to do it. And I decided on a total number of frames here, 30 frames, so 500 milliseconds. So use ref 0, and so we are going to increment the frame number. So we do +1, and here we also exit immediately if frames.current is greater than total frames. So now let's animate. So we calculate the delta, and the delta is what is it? From -2 or 2 minus from. 2 minus from divided by total frames. And then same story, we calculate the matrix and apply it. But here it's based on, it's not from, but delta. That looks pretty nice. Now let's, so it's activating automatically right now, but let's trigger the activation from the React side. So I'm gonna create a state. So active set active. Default value is false. And here, when we press the button, we're gonna activate, so set active to true. And so here in pizza box, we get, so the active property, which we can pass here part of, let's say part of animation. It's funny because my laptop was so hot. I tried to record the video that I frozen vegetables to cool it, and I see it's starting to melting. I'm starting to get some water. It's starting to get a bit dangerous. So active, I can pass it here. Active boolean, and here, so we get active as well. And if it's not active, we return. And maybe after init. If active is false, we return. So let's have a look. So now I press checkout. And that didn't start the animation, and I think it's because I forgot to pass it here as a property. So we have our pizza box here, and if I press checkout, it triggers the animation nicely. So now let's go to the React side and do all the animations that need to be done with reanimated. So I'm going to create an animation value called closing. So use shared value 0. And actually here, instead of setting active to true, I'm going to set closing to 1 using a timing function. So closing dot value equals with timing. We go to 1 and duration. I think I want it to be a bit longer than the closing of the pizza box. Let's put, so the pizza box is 500 milliseconds. Let's put 1 second, but we will, this needs to be tweaked anyways. And let's move also the pizza box to the back. This was just for debugging. So let's move it here. And we can animate here the pizza. So I'm going to create an animated style for the pizza. And so I'm going to do, so pizza, use animated style. So what so we're going to animate opacity, and here, so towards the end of the animation, we want the opacity to go from 1 to 0. So I'm going to do interpolate on closing dot value, and that's starting, let's say 75%. I want the, or half, 50%. I want the opacity to go from 1 to 0. So we can do 0, 5, 1, 1, 0, and here I need to use extrapolate clamp. So it's at 1 in from 0 to 0, 5. And then we can do the scale animation. So transform from 1 to 0. It's an array and scale. So mix, which is a linear interpolation from 0 to 1. No, I think it's just a linear interpolation actually. Of closing dot value. So from 1 to 0. And I want also the box to not be visible. So if I reload, I want the box to not be visible also when the animation hasn't started. So I can create an animated style for the box as well, which I can put here. So box, use animated style. So you see here, we see it at the back. So I can do opacity. So if closing dot value equals 0, the opacity is 0. If not, it's 1. Perfect. And now if I press the button, I just need it animates nicely. And now again, where things get a bit dirty, that's the way I'm gonna animate set active. So I'm gonna pick a progress value, which is gonna trigger the activation of the free.js animation. And I'm gonna do this using use animated reaction. So if, let's say, again, we can tweak the values here, but if closing dot value is greater than 0.5, let's say, so is closing, then we're going to do set active equals true. And again, here I'm using a state, but probably we could use a ref. We don't need to trigger a full re-render of, because we have use frame that is listening to the value. So actually, this one could be a ref. It doesn't have to be a state, and that will be much more performant actually. So if is closing is true, we can do set active true. And here the cool thing is that I have the reanimated ESLint plugin that tells me that this is wrong. Run on JS. So because I call back from the UI thread to the JavaScript thread. And let's have a look. Yeah, I like it. And then when this animation is over, we're going to create a new animation value, which is the box going into the checkout cart and the checkout cart animation. So I'm going to do adding, so use shared value. And we're going to trigger it here when the animation is over. And we can use a spring. So adding dot value with spring to 1. And let me import it. So here in the box, so we're gonna also animate the opacity. So here it's not gonna be 1 anymore, but it's gonna be, so we're gonna do something similar to this actually. So starting some percent, it starts to disappear. Here we can put 0.75. The animation value we're looking to is adding. And then we're going to scale from 1 to 0 and translate to the top right corner. So here for this, we need a transform. So translate X, and we go to pizza, So linear interpolation on adding dot value. And at the beginning it's 0, then it goes to pizza size divided by 2. And this is a positive value. We go to the right side. For the Y, it's going to be a negative value. We go to the top. So we go to the top right. And then scale goes from 1 to 0. So scale. Now I press checkout. Yeah, it animates nicely. And actually, the opacity animation is probably not necessary because it gets so small, but it completely disappears. So here I can put it back to 1, I guess. And now let's animate the shopping cart. So we're going to pass the adding animation value to the checkout component. So I'm going to call it progress and pass the animation value. So here we would have progress, which is a shell value, animated shell value of number. And so this one becomes an animated style. So this one becomes an animated view. Same for the view around the icon. So let me create use animated style. We're missing a bracket. So here, using the progress animation value, we can animate the scale and opacity. I guess, again, here just the scale should be enough. If we go from 0 to 1, so mix. No, actually, we can add some opacity, so it starts to be visible only at a certain point. So I can do progress.value. We go from 0 to 1. So mix from redash. And then here I can do opacity. Interpolate on progress.value. And we do, let's say, 0.5. 1, and it's gonna be 0.1, and we need to add the clamp. Now we can also animate the icon. So we can have icon, use animated style, and we can add transform, scale. And again, yeah, we're gonna have an interpolate. So let's say we have 1.051 and we can do 1, 1.2 or 1.1. So you see here the bubble disappeared from the checkout cart. I press checkout. And yeah, the bouncing was very strong. This is why actually we might want to add back some opacity to the box here style. But other than that, I think it looks pretty cool. So here we removed some opacity, but actually we might want to put it back on adding dot value. Isn't that cool? Guys, that concludes our pizza animation challenge. I'm so happy that we got to play with Free.js. Again, if this was a real world app, I wouldn't use Free.js for this particular example, but I'm so excited that we're starting to build things with Free.js. Thank you, Expo, for bringing us all these integrations into React Native. This is so great that we get to do these 3D things quite easily now with React Native. As you've noticed, there were a couple of things which I didn't know yet, or I don't know yet how to do with Free.js. Applying the transformation matrix properly, setting the default of the primitive component, so having some pivot rotation. I hope that in the comments below you will help me to learn more about Free.js and let me know also if you have some 3D use cases. I am looking forward to talk to you soon, and until next time, happy hacking.